Welcome to the Net Effect, Career Conversations and Connections. Each episode is devoted to bringing interesting guests who offer insights and perspectives on casting one's net on the right side, as Jesus challenged his apostles to do on the Sea of Galilee.
Welcome, everybody. Glad to see you. This is very coordinated with the last meeting. If you missed the last meeting, I'm going to strongly encourage you to go back and watch that recording in its entirety. So these two sessions are actually kind of complementary. They're a duo, they're a set that go together. Today's session just follows on what we were learning last time. Last time we covered the hidden job market and an entirely different way to look for work. But we didn't finish that story. Today, we're going to take it from interviewing all the way through negotiating salary and onboarding yourself and making your first reputation with your boss. There's new information in here that's not in most career books. Even if you're a seasoned person who knows the field, I promise you there's some novelty in the material for today. Session one for today is preparing for interviews. So how do you prepare for an interview when you know you're going to have one? My hot tip is you don't actually start with you. You start with the employer. If you start with the employer, it's almost like think of it as starting in the second person. What do they want? What do they care about? And in order to do that, you have to have a vision in your mind of what employer you're going to be interacting with. So you think about the job that you're seeking. And if you can imagine the details of that job, then you can begin to position yourself as ready to perform it. You can interview better for the position if you'll think about that job instead of thinking about yourself. Lots of books start out with the idea that you should do a self-assessment. You should do an employer assessment, a job assessment, and then you can worry about yourself. So what you need to do is anticipate the selection criteria of the employer. You sit around, literally imagine what will the employer care about and make that list. What skills, traits, experiences, and abilities will the employer base the hiring decision upon? Skills, traits, experiences, and abilities. So if you're taking notes, and I strongly encourage you to take notes because there's a lot of content today. Skills, traits, experiences, and abilities are what you're trying to convey to that employer through your resume, your documents, your cover letter, and most especially through your human interactions and interview settings. Skills, traits, experiences, and abilities. I want you to consider both hard and soft skills. People are pretty good at the hard skills, but they fall on the soft skills. Hard skills are things that are quantifiable, testable, and verifiable. Here's some examples. Hard skills would be fluent in Spanish. I can give you a test and see if you're really fluent in Spanish. Or I can start speaking to you in Spanish and find out. Advanced coding skills in JavaScript, Java, Python, and SQL. Again, easy tests can establish this as true or not true, or even a conversation with a programmer would establish whether that's true or not true. Certified public accountant, perfect example of a hard skill. A credential, something that's either you got it or you don't got it. Soft skills are a little more intangible. They're a little harder to measure. They may be the opinion of others. So it's a little bit harder to both measure soft skills and also represent that you have them or prove that you have them. Soft skills would be things like your demeanor, your human presentation. What's it like to be in the room with you? Do you have a positive, upbeat demeanor? Are you punctual? Do you always hit deadlines? That's an example of a soft skill. And professional appearance is a soft skill. Do you increase morale or decrease morale on the teams that you're on? That's a soft skill. Can you present to a client? That's a soft skill. Can you shake hands with a senior executive without getting nervous? That's a soft skill. Okay. Both of those are important. Here's two examples: school teacher and a summer intern with a wealth advisory office. These are things that everybody kind of knows what they are. I use them as examples because they're clear. Who is the hiring authority for a school teacher? It's a school principal. The point of view of the school principal is the one that you want to have in your mind as you make the list of hiring criteria. So school teacher, licensed in my state. If they're not licensed in my state, that's number one for a reason, because if you're not licensed in my state, I don't have time to talk to you. Outstanding recommendations from your last principal or the supervising teacher, if you're a recent teacher trainee. Outstanding recommendations. And I'm going to put a lot of weight on those recommendations. statement of teaching philosophy that matches my own. So that's kind of hard sometimes to find out, but those are my criteria. Sample lesson plans that impress me, professional but approachable appearance and demeanor. This is what I call the calculus of appearance. I want my teacher to be not too upscale. I don't want to see thousands of dollars of jewelry. I just want them to be neat and proper and approachable in appearance, up to date on educational theory, coachable. I want a teacher that can take advice from the principal and can be coached. Who's the decision maker here? Who am I that's reading this list to a principal? All right, so let's shift gears. Now we're going to talk about an intern in a wealth advisory office. What are the selection criteria for this person? I want them to be a student from a college or a university that I favor. I might favor the state university where I got my degree. I might favor the state college where one of my favorite employees went because I know that's a source of solid, well-prepared, energetic people. A college or a university that I favor. I want this person to have taken many prerequisite courses. That would be accounting, investments, finance, history of the stock market, probability, theories of investing, and things like that. I want them to have a very professional appearance and demeanor because they're going to be in my office. They're going to be interacting with clients. And I want them to be somewhat formal in presentation. I don't want them to be slack. I don't want them to appear informal or overly familiar. I want them skilled at modeling investment scenarios up to the portfolio level. I want them skilled at creating visual presentations of quantitative data because we're going to make pitch decks and we're going to make custom portfolios for clients. And I want this person to handle some of those duties for me. And I want them to bring people to me that I think might become clients. If I think that they have family members or friends that need wealth advisory services, that's going to be a big, huge plus. Who am I doing this evaluating? I'm the independent wealth advisor. I'm owning my own firm. It's probably a relatively small firm. The decision will be entirely mine, whether to hire somebody or not. Okay, that's how you start. And only after you do that little exercise do you start to think about yourself. How can you show that you have the skills, traits, experiences, and abilities? If you did not write that down yet, write it down now. Skills, traits, experiences, and abilities that the hiring authority will view as critical for the selection. You can scour your whole background. One of the most important things for you to get is it's not just your employment background or even your employment and college, university background that determines whether you have these skills. You scour your whole background. That's employment, school, activities at college or even in high school, service, any kind of community service that you've done, church experiences, sports, scouting, hobbies, passions, and pastimes, your travel background, your family background. All of these can be sources of evidence that you possess the skills, traits, experiences, and abilities that I'm after. Just take, for example, the lessons plan from the teacher example. Of course, you're going to have some examples from, if you're a recently trained teacher trainee, you're going to have some examples from your teacher training. You may have some examples from your coursework. If you dig a little deeper and realize that some of your coolest examples might come from other sources. Let's find somebody to read this. Let's try Joshua.
I had my nieces and nephews all day on a recent Saturday while my sister took the bar exam. They are ages 8, 9, and 12. I organized a theater project for them, which included making puppets out of household and kitchen items, making a stage out of a big cardboard box, writing a script, and putting on a puppet theater show. I even got some neighborhood kids to come to the show. This required the ability to keep the 12-year-old engaged as a leader and co-producer and working within the limits of the younger children's artistic and performance abilities. The show was a success. I was able to teach them some of the history of puppet theater. We got a standing ovation from a crowd of serious theater critics. Oh, and my sister passed the bar.
Thank you, Joshua. That was perfect. Some of your examples that might be the most compelling might come from something that was actually a bit more of a casual experience. All of these are ways that you establish that you have the skills, traits, experiences, and abilities that the employer is after, the ones that they're making the decision on. So after you make this list of skills, traits, experiences, and abilities that you believe the employer is going to be looking for. You dig in your background to link experiences and stories to each one of the criteria that you've identified. You do this in advance. Don't go in there cold and let them ask you questions that you did not already prepare for, knowing the kinds of things they're going to ask you. So how do you power up your presentation? You can take this kind of above and beyond just rote stuff by using hero stories. Hero stories establish your skills, traits, experiences, and abilities, usually involving you doing more than just showing up and going through a process. Let's start to work on defining a hero story. Hero story is an above and beyond. When did you do an above and beyond? When did you save the day? When did you deliver the impossible? When did you stand out as a performer? When did you contribute the needed solution? And if you sit around and think about this for a while, you should be able to come up with 10 to 30 of these. Everybody should come up with at least 10. Sometimes they're grand. I saved a life. Sometimes they're somewhat more modest. I showed up last week on time for every appointment. Sometimes they're grand. Sometimes they're modest. But hero stories are a background utility that you're going to use in your job search, both in your documents, but most especially in your interviews. Hero stories actually become versatile. You may have a hero story that you think is about meeting a deadline, and you find out that the person's more interested in leadership skills, and you realize that your hero story about meeting a deadline is also an example of you presenting leadership skills. You may have developed a hero story about working on a team, but they don't ask you anything about a team, but they say, can you be persuasive? Tell me about a time when you were persuasive and you realized that the reason that you were effective on that team was because you were persuasive. So hero stories can be molded or twisted a little bit to apply to lots of questions and examples. They're really a very versatile item. If we were in a workshop, I would literally stick you in a breakout room and make you come up with 10 of these just for practice. Let's do a version of that. Everybody come up with one hero story in the next 30 seconds, and then I'll call on a couple of you and ask you if you could tell me about a time when you were a hero. You did it above and beyond. You accomplished something that was difficult that other people said couldn't be done. That's 30 seconds. I'll start by giving an example from my own background, and people do seem over history to be impressed by this. I took an overload in college for one semester. And at the end of the semester, I had to do a tremendous amount of work to complete all these classes that I had. I wrote 7 papers in 5 days. It was just an incredible amount of focus. The papers were not perfect. They did not all earn an A, but I turned all of them in on time, and they were all good. They just weren't perfect. That's an example of a hero story. Let's go with Ann. Would you be willing to share a hero story, or you can just say pass?
I don't know whether this is a hero story or not. I was a trainer for the Girl Scouts, and I had this mother who was feeling very inept. And I pointed out to her that the vice president of my company had a child who was very all over the place. When he would come to visit the office, he would run all over the place. But he was the vice president of sales of a large company. And he had become that, even though he was the same kind of person. His little boy would come to the office and run all over the office and get into everything. The child and the parent were similar, and this was the vice president of the company. This child who was running all over, that was this Girl Scout leader's child, had potential to be vice president of a sales department of a large corporation.
So did your counsel reassure her about the eventual possibilities of her youngster?
Oh, she was excited that he had potential, that he wasn't just a runaround.
Yeah.
To me, that was a hero story because she now saw her child in a different light.
That's great. Terrific.
That is quintessentially a hero story. Thank you, Ann. That's perfect. Here are the rules to hero stories. They have to have net positive content. They can have negativity in them, but when you look at the positive and the negative, the positive has to at least a little bit outweigh the negative. I've noticed that sometimes people tell what they think is a hero story, but the negative content overwhelms the positive part. They hit the topic, but they missed on it being a hero story. In hero stories, you are always the center of the story. You're the person who came up with a solution. You're the actor, the author, the person with agency. You can't have a hero story that you observe, and you can't have a hero story that's about other people. You can't say, my parents were immigrants. That's not a hero story for you. It's a hero story for them. You have to be the center of the story, or it's not a story you should be telling in this context. Don't throw someone else under the bus to make yourself look good. Don't tell a story where your boss at your last job looks like an idiot, or your spouse looks like they made a mistake. These are the 3 rules for hero stories. Net positive content. You are the author and the actor that created the solution. You be aware of any damage that you might be doing to other people that are mentioned in the story.
Hey, Don, I have a question real quick.
Go ahead.
So I love this, but I wonder, would it be wise for someone who's never done this before they go into an interview to maybe tell those hero stories to their friends or family, get some feedback, or at least get comfortable with telling that story?
Yeah, I have a structure for how you structure a hero story. And yes, someone should practice, and they should try out their hero stories, because sometimes people don't realize how embarrassing some things are. Some things should be left in the briefcase and not gotten out.
If you're not comfortable on a video, because many of the interviews today are taking place just like we're taking place today with a Zoom call, you might want to think about what you look like when you're delivering that story. You can get a free Zoom account, record it, watch it yourself as well.
Beautiful advice. You should practice your interviewing, your stories, your responses. You should practice them out loud, because there's a huge difference between cognition and behavior. You can know what you're supposed to do, but when you do it, you don't do it very well. Unfortunately, I find that really smart people are some of the hardest to coach. Invent exactly what is the right thing to say, and then they won't practice it because they're smart and they think they're done. They're not done. You have to actually practice it. There's a reason that famous actors and actresses have rehearsal. They have rehearsal to get good at it. It's being smart and having the right words does not replace practicing, which is your point. I take it well. Those are hero stories. This is the structure of telling a hero story. I got this from a Microsoft executive. They used to teach this in Microsoft. They taught executives how to tell stories using Parla. Let's walk through what Parla is. P-A-A-R-L-A. The first thing is the problem. You've seen these before. Everyone has as stars and pars. But anyway, I like Parla. It's just more sophisticated. Problem, analysis. And again, if it's your hero story, you have to be the author of that analysis. Then you took action based upon your analysis. You did not take action before considering what action to take. You had a net positive result, no matter how muddy or messy the process was net positive. And then this next L is kind of a little interesting. What do you learn from this? Okay, what did you learn from this? So you have this event, you learn something from it, and then the final A is you applied this learning in new settings. That's Parla. Some examples. Let's say you had a problem with a team member that wasn't delivering the goods. The other people on the team came to you and said, you've got to talk to her because you're the team leader. So you go and you talk to her and you say, you're letting us down. You're not keeping up. And then she reveals that her mother is ill and she's been spending a tremendous amount of her psychic energy trying to support her mother through this process. And you decide to go back to the team and say, we have to work around the fact that she's having a personal crisis. Let's support her. That's your action. The result was your team project came together after all. What I learned from this was to be careful to diagnose problems on a team and not just assume that I know what the problem is, do a little more fact finding. I've applied this on all the other places where I've been a supervisor or a leader, and it's made me much more effective. That's Parla. I hope you can embrace this. Session 2, we're going to talk about interview questions. You've got now content to present. What kind of questions are you going to have to respond to? Interview questions. Here are the classics. You've all seen these before. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Is a business question with a business answer. Don't get off of business. I interviewed this one guy and said, tell me a little bit about yourself. And he started talking to me about how he'd recently been married and how much he loved his wife. And I was thinking, well, I'm not hiring your wife and I don't really care. It was very distracting. And I interviewed another guy who started talking about his tennis game and how it was really pretty good for an amateur. And he went on about that when I said, tell me a little bit about yourself. It's a business question with a business answer. Don't go down a side path. What are your strengths? If you don't know your strengths, I can't really help you. You should know them, come up with them. What are your weaknesses? That's almost a trick question. Please don't say you work so hard you forget to smell the roses, because that's just hackneyed and overworn. Pick a weakness you've already fixed. Okay. What are your weaknesses? Well, when I started at the company, I noticed that quite a few of the people here had a more robust vocabulary than I had. My vocabulary was always sufficient to do whatever I wanted to do, but I realized people are pretty fancy around here. I went out and got all of these SAT prep books, and I just read the vocabulary sections and memorized a great number of words, and it's really improved my loquaciousness. So that's a problem I worked on. That's an example of how I address when I do have weaknesses. I love that word, loquaciousness. It is a GRE word, SAT word. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? It's a tricky question. It looks simple enough, but let me teach you how to deal with that. Turn it around. Let's say your interviewer's name is Paul. Paul, that's a really good question. Let me ask you this. If I came here and I did a really great job, what would be possible for me in 5 years? Okay, that's a great way to answer that question. Do not do what, I hate to admit it, a client of mine was asked this question. And he said, I expect to be making $250,000 a year and supervising you. That was that guy's last minute in the interview.
Don't you know it?
Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Ask them, if I do a great job, what's possible? What's the worst thing your old boss would say about you? That's a question I'll address in a moment, but be careful there. Why do you want to work here? If you cannot answer that question, then you shouldn't be sitting in that seat. Please prepare an answer to that question before you go anywhere. Why do you want to work here? Give me 5 reasons I should hire you. That exercise of preparing for that question will give you ammunition to use throughout the interview. That's the classics. I'm trying to get past the classics because it's more interesting, but you should definitely be ready for all of those. Now, the next type of question to get ready for, beyond the classics, is behavioral interviewing questions. Everybody uses these now. There's not a soul out there that does hiring that's not been trained in how to ask these questions. They all begin with a structure called tell me about a time when. Now, when somebody asks you a behavioral interviewing question, you cannot give a policy answer. I'll give you an example. If they say to you, tell me about a time when you had to discipline a subordinate, and you say, well, I think it's important to have a stepped discipline system that the first transgression gets this level of response, the next transgression gets that level of response. And I think it's helpful to map some of this out in advance. Did I answer the question?
I think you did.
No, I didn't. I gave a policy answer. I didn't tell it about a time. So they want you to actually tell a story about a time when you disciplined a subordinate. I gave a policy answer, which will get me no points for answering that question. You could not even realize you just didn't answer the question. How do you do that? Here's some examples. I'll just read some of these. Tell me about a time when you had a problem with a team member's performance. These are classic. You're going to get asked these. Tell me about a time when you organized something new, created or started something. Tell me about a time when you had to make a decision using financial or quantitative information. Tell me about a time when you did not have the resources to complete an assignment. What did you do and how did that work out? By the way, when they put that on the end of the question, what did you do and how did that work out? Perk up, because that's a question where they expect you to make a mistake. Tell me about a time when you had to learn something new without any training. Tell me about a time when you disagreed with a decision from your boss. What did you do and how did that work out? Tell me about a time when you had to work with someone you didn't like. Tell me about a time when you had to deal with a difficult client or customer. When you had to write something on the job. Could be anything, a letter, content for a website, a poster, or whatever. Tell me about a time when you totally failed at something. And tell me about a time when you observed a colleague doing something illegal or unethical. You look at the criteria for selection, figure out what skills would be traits, experiences, or abilities would be evidence that you have satisfy that criteria, and then prepare in advance your behavioral interviewing responses relative to those criteria because they're going to come up. Hero stories can make you a superstar at behavioral interviewing. So you're not just going to pass, you're going to stand out. People are going to remember you. That Don Asher, he nailed it. I mean, he really impressed me with this answer and that answer. That's why hero stories need to be ready in your pocket. I bring this up because I finally learned how to teach this. It took me years to learn how to teach this.
That's a tough one.
Yeah, sometimes they don't want you to tell the truth. Now, why would I say that? They don't want you to tell the truth because they want to assess your judgment. If I ask you what's the worst thing you ever did, and you tell a horrible story, then I know you don't have any judgment at all, and I can't hire you because you have no judgment, okay? You don't tell about something bad, okay? You tell about something either very mild or you can't think of anything. Here's the other model for that is what's the worst thing your last boss ever did? I want to be clear about this. They don't actually want to know what's the worst thing you or your last boss ever did. They want to know, do you have any judgment? Be careful, be mature, be sophisticated, and don't answer questions like this with disaster stories. Even in this area where you end up telling a hero story, it looked like I made a mistake, but as it turned out, that's now my favorite customer and we're their favorite account. So if you do tell something like that, make sure you tell something that's actually ends up being a hero story. On to some other challenges. You could do a whole hour on any one of these three things here, or a whole day, frankly. Illegal questions are usually asked by untrained interviewers. They're asked by line officers rather than HR people. HR people know what illegal questions are. Do you have any family plans that would interrupt you in the first year of employment? That is illegal. It's radioactive. How do you answer illegal questions? One of them is you can deflect it just by asking a different question, kind of try not to answer it. But the other thing you could do is answer the concern behind the question without answering the question. If they say, do you have any family plans that would disrupt your first year of service with us? You could say, gosh, that's a little bit personal. It's also an illegal question, believe it or not, to ask people what kind of car they drive. So what kind of a vehicle do you drive? I want to make sure that you're going to be at work on time. And then you, instead of answering that question, you answer the concern behind the question. I always show up where I'm supposed to be. You can count on me. Okay, so that's how you deal with the illegal question. Either deflect it if you can, or answer the concern behind the question without actually answering the question. Case questions are a specialized area. If you think you're going to face case questions, then go look at some of the books on case questions. And there's a couple of different kinds of case questions where they put out some data and ask you to take that data and answer a question. That's a proper case question. Those questions of how many golf balls fit in a 747, those are actually not case questions. Those are trick questions. So this bottom category, stress questions, puzzles, and trick question. A puzzle is a dilemma. You know, you realize that you could stop a train that's going to wreck and kill 5 babies by pushing one person in front of the train that would cause the train to stop. What would you do? That's a dilemma. There's no easy right answer. So all answers are wrong. Those are stress questions, puzzle questions, and trick questions. Get a little bit of practice answering these, especially if you're a young person. If you're a young person, that whole golf ball thing and several things like that can be answered by knowing a few basic facts, such as there's 320 million Americans. You need to walk into that meeting knowing that. And you can take that and start to build answers on the fly to questions such as how many gas stations are there in America? How many cars are there in America? And prepare for those. Now, I want to get into some secrets. Okay, everything I've shown you far, you could get almost out of any book. But this is a secret. Brains work really fast, really fast. Stalling even a fraction of a second can improve your answers, especially if you're in stressful territory or in areas where you didn't prepare anything and you need a moment to think about what you're going to say. You can get a lot of time by just repeating their question. How many gas stations are there in America? How many gas stations are there in America? Okay, that's long enough for me, using my brain, to come up with an approach to that question. You can also just say, that's a really good question. The amount of time that it takes you to say that will vastly improve your answer. By the way, this is not my opinion. This is proved. This is the real deal. Ask them to repeat the question. Can you repeat that? I'm not sure I heard you right. You can also ask them to rephrase the question, which gives you a tremendous amount of time to come up with an answer. I'm not sure I understand what you're asking. Can you rephrase that? You wouldn't want to use that a lot, but you could use it when you're really facing a stumper. Okay, that's big secret number one. Stalling even a fraction of a second improves your answers. Big secret number two, it is absolutely okay to say nothing comes to mind. Nothing comes to mind. This is really useful when they've asked you to compromise someone else. It would be really good to use this one. For example, tell me about a time when you observed a colleague doing something illegal or unethical. One of the best answers to that is, well, nothing comes to mind. I've been really blessed to work with some great people, and I can't think of an example like this. That's a secret get out of jail free card. Big secret number three is saying, I don't know. There are interviewers who will try to get you to bluff knowledge. They'll use a term that doesn't exist and see if you bluff. So once in a while, it's okay to say, I don't know. If you do it a lot, they'll think you don't know anything. But if you do it a little bit, it actually increases their estimation of your expertise. Don't be one of those people who will never say, I don't know. Judiciously using this a little bit can really help you in an interview. Big secret number four, these are get out of jail free cards. These are ways to get a mulligan, ways to get a do-over if you blow a question. How can you tell you blow a question? If you watch the demeanor of the person who's interviewing you and they wince or frown or stare off into space or otherwise exhibit that you're not answering effectively, then you can get a do-over or a redirection by using these sentences. Did I answer your question? They're going to say, no, you didn't answer my question. I had a finance question and gave me an accounting answer. And then you have a chance to say, oh, well, let me answer it a different way then. Is that what you had in mind? No, that's not what I had in mind. Wow, we could never do that. That's crazy. Well, that gives you a chance to say, well, I can see in some settings it wouldn't work. Let me see if I can address it better for you. And then would that approach work in your organization? That gives them a chance to say, that might work in higher ed, but that's not going to work in the real world, et cetera, et cetera. These little questions are redirections. They're really, really useful. Some candidates get stumped at the questions to ask them stage. If they say, do you have any questions for us? And you have none, that's a very bad sign. They don't like that. I've only known one person ever that was hired who said that they had no questions when they said, do you have any questions for us? And they said, no, I have no questions. You've addressed all of my concerns. Now, only one that's ever been hired. All the others that have ever said that were not hired. Come up with some. Here's some standards. Suppose I did a really good job in this role. What would that look like? That's my favorite question to ask them anyway, because if you ask them this, they're going to tell you what they're looking for. They're going to tell you what they expect out of a strong performer in this role. That's a very good question. If you can ask that question early on, it's better than waiting till the end. But at the end, it's still a very good question. What kind of person thrives in this role? What happened to the last person to hold this job? If all the last three people that held this job left under a stress leave and are no longer alive, then you know something about this job. But if the last three people to hold this job were promoted and are doing fantastic with the company, then you know something else about that role. That's an important question to ask anyway. I find that candidates, for whatever reason, are afraid to ask about hiring processes. But you should not be afraid to ask about hiring processes. You have the right to ask. They may deflect, they may demur from answering, but you can ask them, can you tell me more about your hiring process? How many people are you bringing in for interviews like this? How many interviews do you anticipate? And what will be the format of each? And the reason for that is formats can change. One interview might be with your colleagues, another one might be with two senior officers, and the third one might be dinner out with the CEO. And when do you anticipate making a decision and extending an offer? And when would you like to bring someone on board? You have the right to ask these questions. I had a candidate once that did not ask these questions. They invited her in for a fourth interview, and she came in aggressive. She was like, 4 interviews. Wow, can't you make up your mind? Gosh, am I going to have 4 interviews to buy pencils for my office? She came in aggressive and they didn't hire her. But here's the funny thing. The 4th interview was a hiring interview. I mean, that was the one where they expected to extend an offer and close the deal. And she came in aggressive and they changed their mind. And then, do you mind if I ask you a couple of questions about your experiences here? What do you like about your job? What's next for you in the company? Do you have advancement on your horizon? Robin, what do you think about that woman that came in aggressive about the 4 interviews?
Well, that's tough, Don. I don't know that I would be real comfortable.
She blew it. She totally and completely blew that. They were ready. They were meeting with her to close the deal.
I think it's helpful when you can have those questions and they're not just stored up at the end. If you can find a way to interject those questions during the interview to be kind of engaging, I think it becomes really effective. And I think it's a more natural interview that way.
Yeah, weave that stuff in, but you got to have something to ask when they get to the end and say, do you have any questions for us? You got to have one more. All right, types of interviews. Most interview books focus entirely on how do you interview for a posted opening. And if you saw the first session of this training, then you know that I'm advocating that you spend a tremendous amount of your time talking to people before there's a known opening. So this section is going to be very different than a lot of other books might have, the order of the material and the content as well. How do you talk to people when there's no known opening? Okay, how do you do that? Following the directive that you get jobs by talking to people, the more ways you can talk to people, the better. And here's 5 different ways to interview for a position that doesn't exist. Have an advice interview. What do you do interview? Informational interview, reporting back to some other interview, very effective, a little peculiar. Candidate in waiting interview. These are part of your toolkit if you're running a job search on the hidden job market. These are part of your toolkit. Interviewing is a big concept. Interviewing and networking sounds tedious. It looks like the kind of thing, I'd rather, have my foot run over by a truck than network with strangers. Don't look at it that way. You get jobs by talking to people, and these are structured ways to get people to talk to you. It removes the whole I'm begging for a job aspect, because you're not begging for a job by using these techniques. Anything that you do that gets you talking to people is good and proper approach in a job search. So how do you think about this? If you're out there circulating around in the right kinds of industries, the right kinds of companies with the right kinds of colleagues, then sooner or later, you're going to stumble across somebody who needs your help right now. You're always in the right place. Sooner or later, it'll be the right time. That's the way to look at this. And how do you gracefully do that? I'm going to encourage you, as this was explicated in the first training session, learn how to tell people you're not going to beg for a job. You literally tell them, I'm not looking for a position with you or your employer or your team or your office. I'm just looking for your advice, ideas, leads, and information. And you need to mean this. I've learned over the years that sometimes people say this, but they don't mean it. You need to actually mean this, because if you mean it, then you'll act correctly. You're not in that office begging for a job. You're in there getting advice, ideas, leads, information, and referrals. If they need you, they'll bring it up. If they want you, they'll bring it up. They'll say, hey, you seem kind of perfect for something we're looking for right now. My friend down the hall is doing the hiring for that. Are you willing to talk to her? Let them do that. Otherwise, you don't do it at all. This is important. There's many variations on this. You can kind of say, I would be amenable to being hired by you, but it's not my real goal in meeting with you today. And you do that by using language like this. I'm not necessarily looking for a job in your firm. I'm just looking for your advice about how to break into this industry. So there's a bunch of verbiage on this. Please go back, if you missed it, to the first training session, because there's a lot more information on this kind of stuff. Remember that you're not trying to get them to hire you if they don't want to hire you. That's not what you're doing. You're trying to get them to tell you about somebody that might need you right now. That's what you're trying to do. You're not trying to force. Networking is about connectivity. I always think about nodes of nerves. The central part of a nerve has these long dendrites that stick out to all the other nerves. You're trying to get somebody to say, way out in the periphery of my world, there's somebody that's looking for you right now, and I'm going to just send you in their direction. That's the way to think about this. Here's my favorite ask. Do you know of any companies that are growing in this space that we're talking about here, whatever industry or type of field it might be. Companies that are innovating in the news, making a splash, gaining market share, or launching something new. Any companies that are making a scene. Why? Because that's where new permanent jobs come from. That's just a really good question. And if people know about somebody that's growing companies take more risk as well. If you're not perfect for a job and the company's growing, they'll take a risk on you. If the company's not growing and they have an opening, they actually tend to be very conservative and they're looking for the full basket of skills and abilities and traits that they have on the position requisition. Growing companies take more risk. They're more creative. They'll take somebody that's not perfect.
That's just a great question. If you're a job seeker or you're a student and you're searching, those are questions you should be asking your friends, your family, your neighbors, and people that you come in contact with. Don't you think?
Absolutely. It should be something you're pushing every direction for. Yeah. Growing companies are the secret. They're the secret sauce. Back to these interviews when there's no known opening. We're going to walk through them. An advice interview is exactly what it sounds like. You just tell people, hey, I'm on the job market. This is what I'm looking for. This is my story. Here are my documents. What's your advice? Okay. Anybody can give you advice. People like to give advice. And if you tell them I'm not looking for a position with your firm, I just want your advice, and you mean it, you're going to get great advice. What do you do interview? This is when you're trying to explore something you don't know much about. So like a new industry. Or maybe you're trained in one thing and they're doing something totally different. It usually looks like this. I got your name because someone said you're doing really well in this field. I'm trying to learn more about careers and industries. Can you tell me more about what you do? How did you get into this? What kind of training is required for most people that break into this field? Do you think someone with my skills could get a job in this industry? What's your advice for me? So what do you do interview? Everybody's an expert in themselves. And people like to talk about themselves. What do you do interview will work great. That's a close cousin to what's called an informational interview. However, for an informational interview, you really should have some knowledge and desire to go into that field before you do informational interviews. So it's not as exploratory as the what do you do interview or the advice interview. You've got to already have some interest in the field to do an informational interview, and you structure the interview to find out exactly what it's going to take for you to break in. And so it looks like this. How did you create success in your career? What's the best way to break into this field? What ensures continued advancement once one begins in this field? What do entry-level jobs like this pay typically? Have there been any surprises for you in this industry, or there are myths you want to shatter for me? That's an important question to ask because many industries are not like people think they are. I'll pick on law and fashion. Law is extremely meticulous, and everyone thinks of it as grand and meaningful. It's really boils down to, did you miss a comma? And anyone in law can tell you that at length. But if you're getting your ideas about law from the television, then you really don't know anything about law. So that question, any myths you want to shatter for me, let's go to fashion. Fashion is only good looking from the audience. Fashion is a brutal business and it's not attractive. And that's one of the things you need to know if you're interested in the fashion business. It's curiously different than people think it is. Who else does this? Where else should I be looking? This is a very important question to ask because you may be interested in something and you only see the tip of it. But if you ask this, who else does this? Where else should I be looking? You may discover this whole new world that anyone in the field can tell you about. And I'll use advertising as an example. Advertising done in agencies is the smallest little tip of the iceberg. The greater tip of the iceberg, or the greater part of the iceberg, is actually marketing communications departments at companies. And all these ancillary consultants that float around the advertising industry. So there's literally probably 20 jobs outside of agencies for every one that's inside an agency. And if you ask anybody in advertising, where else should I be looking? They'll clue you in. They'll say, hey, if you like this kind of work, the agencies are only part of it. Then you have to look at this and this and this and this. My favorite advertising job, and it's kind of a weird one, Robin, is underwear wrangler. I'll let you wonder what that means.
That does not conjure up an image that I want to continue to think about.
That is a job. That is a job. And then what advice do you have for someone like me? I love when people end interviews with that. open-ended. What advice do you have for me? Informational interviewing is a stalwart part of interviewing. And how do you talk about money gracefully? Don't ask people what they earn. That's rude. But you can ask obliquely if you learn how. You can say, what could a person expect to make in a position like this? Or what would be a typical salary industry-wide for someone in a position like this? It's a gentle way of finding out how much things, and almost as an aside, if your company has a don't ask, don't tell policy about salary, somebody is being treated poorly. And if you don't know who that somebody is, then it's you. Make it your business in a company to find out what other people make, that you're not underpaid. I actually wrote a master's thesis on the gender-based wage gap. And part of the gender-based wage gap is based upon these secrecy policies that keep people from learning what other people are paid. Make it your business to find out what other people are paid. I like this interview a lot. It's called Reporting Back to Some Other Interview. It allows you to go talk to people who would never talk to you if you came at them frontally. What are you doing? You're working on a report for a class. You're working on a paper for a class. You're a member of a job club doing some research. You're going to report back to the job club. Or you're writing an article. And these days, you can write an article you can do a podcast. You can write an article for your blog. It gives you an excuse to call people up. This has to be true, by the way. I don't want anyone to think, and this is important, Robin, and you know me. It's important that you understand that nothing I say should be construed as a license for you to tell something that's not true. So if you say you're writing an article for your blog, you better have a blog and you better write that article. Here's an example. Let's say you have a job club for PhD candidates and you want to go interview people. Then you can literally just say that. I'm in a job club for PhD candidates and postdocs interested in careers in industry. I'm developing a report on what employers look for when hiring in, name that field, finance, name that field. Would you help me out by answering a few simple questions? That's this technique. Here's the rest of the questions that person, this is just an example. Does your company ever hire PhDs? If not, do you think they would consider it? What skills are most important to get hired into roles like this one we're discussing today? How could a PhD or postdoc prove that she had these skills? How could a PhD or postdoc get an internship here while they're still in their academic training program? What, in your opinion, are the best reasons to hire a less experienced person or a person with advanced training in another area? What is your hiring cycle? When do you look at new hire resumes each year? When do you interview? When do you expect offers to go out? And everyone always says, just apply online. How do we get an actual person to talk to us about employment at a company like yours? This is a very effective technique because you're basically asking all the questions that you need the answers to break into this new field. So again, you're writing a paper, you're writing an article, you're producing a podcast, you're a member of a job club doing some research that will be shared with others. This is a very, very effective way to get people to talk to you. The candidate in waiting interview is not well understood and not well used, but it's a fantastic interview. This is when you approach someone who could hire you. This only works if you have advanced skills. You have established yourself as someone who has a level and particularity of expertise. You contact employers that could hire you and say, I know you're not hiring right now, but I'd like to just stop by, drop off my CV, shake your hand, or these days, bump elbows, and just introduce myself. And if you ever need someone like me, you'll think of me first. That's called a candidate in waiting interview. They're fantastic devices to get jobs in small towns. They're fantastic devices if you have a lot of friends who can introduce you to their boss. I have some research that shows that you have a 2/3 chance of getting a job if you can just get 10 of your friends to take you to work and introduce you to their boss. I'll share it with anybody that wants it. It's very interesting research. I'll give you an example from here on the slide. I'm an aerosol engineer with R&D experience. I know you're not hiring right now, but I'd like to stop by, drop off my CV, and if you ever need anyone like this, you'll think of me first. I'll be in and out of your office in less than a minute. That's the sentence that causes people to take this meeting. I'll be in and out of your office in less than a minute. Could I stop by tomorrow? What works for you? Okay, that's the candidate in waiting interview. Very, very powerful tool. Now let's go back to classic interviews for known openings. The classic interviews for known openings, this is the stuff that you've probably been trained in since high school. I do want to talk about the look for just a moment. According to Malcolm Gladwell, it is hard to shave a second fine enough that people can't make a judgment by looking at you. So it takes way less than a second for them to tell if they like the way you look, if they think that you might belong in their company or not. Spend that time to look right, wear the right clothes, stand in the right way, speak at the right volume, use the right cadence. That's about the right look. If you don't look right, people won't hire you, even if they love everything else about you. You can like this or not like it. It really doesn't matter. It's still true. Try to spend your energy on this. I always tell people, if you can, go by and look at how people are dressed that are holding this job right now. And if you have no other choice, level with some executive assistant or administrative assistant and just say, look, I have an interview with the boss. I don't know how you dress in the office. Could you tell me a little bit about the office? Is it really formal or really informal? What do you think would be the best thing for me to wear? If you have sincere interest, an executive assistant will tell you what they believe you should do. You do need to know that the first thing they're going to do is go tell somebody that you called and asked that. These days, a lot of interviews are by Zoom or Skype or Meetup. So that's a model. It doesn't change the look problem, but I guess you can wear different pants. 4 minutes early is on time. I cannot stress this enough. If you're too early, you disrupt the office. If you walk in at the minute that you're scheduled, then they're already worried you're not going to show up. So I use 4 minutes. I really mean 5, but I need people to know that I don't mean kind of 5. I mean exactly 5. Show up 4 minutes early where you're supposed to be. And you need to know where you're supposed to be. If you have a big organization and they say, well, your appointment's at 9, well, you got to find out, is it 9 at the guard gate, 9 at the elevator, 9 o'clock in your office? What do I need to do to get to the point where you want me to be at 9? The rule on that is it's on you to find out, and you need to be 4 minutes early, wherever it is that they think that they want you to show up at the time. Think of small talk in advance. Small talk is a field in and of itself. The safe stuff is the weather, some recent sports event. Those are kind of safe ways to have a small talk. Be really careful how you answer this. Did you have any trouble finding us? They're like inviting you to whine about traffic and parking. And if you whine about traffic and parking, you just failed the interview. So that little innocuous, hey, did you have any trouble finding us? And the other thing is, do you need anything? Do you need a glass of water, a cup of coffee? My advice is don't need a glass of water or a cup of coffee. Don't do that. The support person may be trained to ask you that, but you're not supposed to arrive thirsty or under coffee. You're supposed to take care of that yourself. So the correct answer is no, I'm all set. Thank you so much. They may ask a structured question set, or they may just ramble. The ramblers are the worst because you have to then insert your information about what you're good at. Ramblers are not preferred. You would rather go through a structured question set. Be ready for all the classics, be ready for the behaviorals, and be ready for, do you have any questions for us? So that's classic interviewing. Now, what about show and tell? Consider bringing some show and tell or some leave behind. This can be very effective. It can help you stand out in a process. It can be memorable. That would be a longer version of your resume with more information on it, maybe a work product, an award you won. Don't carry a big sample case with you to the meeting. The best thing to have is what's called a padfolio. I don't seem to have one here right now, but a padfolio is perfect. Travel light, travel fast. That good old-fashioned briefcase looks like it weighs 100 pounds, and that's not courant. I would not carry that. I would carry a padfolio. When you do have show and tell, wait for the right moment to pull it out. And that right moment may never arrive. So that's show and tell. Okay. They say, we'll be in touch. What do you do? They say, don't call us, we'll call you. What do you do? You don't want to be in a position where you're totally passive about the next step. You actually want at least the permission to ask them what's going on. Why haven't I heard from you? I know you'll be in touch with me for next steps, but when, if I haven't heard from you by then, should I give you a nudge to see what my status is? That's the way you get around that. Before you leave, you literally ask them, well, yes, I know you'll be in touch, but when, if I haven't heard anything, should I reach out to you to see what my status is? Gives you a chance to go around that. Don't call us, we'll call you. And this is super important. Don't get frustrated with the start and stop of hiring. I recently worked with an executive. It took 6 months for him to take a position with this company. 6 months. He was in Singapore. They were in Boston. They kept sending different people out to talk to him. They brought him to Boston, and then everything would go cold. Then it'd heat back up. All he had to do in that 6 months is express frustration, and he would have been removed from consideration. But he ended up taking a $500,000 a year job because he patiently waited out their process. You cannot tell why a company stops hiring you. You cannot tell. Maybe they have a hiring freeze. Maybe they have a budget freeze. Maybe somebody gets sick and takes a sick leave, and they're the next step in the process. Maybe the boss thinks they ought to restructure the position, and then she tries for like 3 months to get them to restructure it. They never do, and then they hire somebody. This start and stop is just part of the process. And young people in particular get mad at companies. They'll say, well, that company, I applied, I interviewed there, they never told me anything. That's how this works. There's a start, stop. That's how it works. So just gently nudge them. Hey, still out here, still interested in your company. I know that things can come up and things can get delayed, but just wanted to reiterate that I'm interested in your company. And when you're ready to take up the process again, I'm ready to pursue it. You don't get frustrated. You don't get mad. You don't send them a mean little note, because that's defeatist. Okay. And don't guess why they're not calling you. There's 100 reasons they might not call you that has nothing to do with you. Screening interviews. Screening interviews are often done by a lower level person. Okay. It's usually not a decision maker that does screening interviews. And for that reason, they can't answer a lot of your questions. They can't make decisions. They can't change criteria. Screening interviews are unique in the following way. You can't win a screening interview. You can only not fail them. Your job is simply to stay alive so that they decide, okay, we're going to move Asher to the next level. That's your job. How do you get there? Be ready to answer all the questions in the affirmative. Don't ever say no in a screening interview, because you can't actually tell. You don't have enough information to say no. If they say to you, hey, are you willing to move to Lower Dusty Nowhere for an assignment? Don't say, no, I don't want to go to Lower Dusty Nowhere. Just say, tell me more. What can you tell me more about the assignment? That's how you stay alive through a screening interview. Maybe they say to you, do you have any experience with QuantScan 4? I don't know what that is. I made it up. Your answer is not no. It's, I've taught myself many programming languages, and I have a friend who's going to walk me through QuantScan 4 tomorrow, demonstrate it for me. Don't be screened out on salary. If they say, are you happy to work at X dollars per year? You just say, I'm sure we can make that work, because you cannot negotiate salary in a screening interview. So what about these canned interviews? This is the latest thing. People have to go into these rooms and stare at a camera. I find this to be really stressful for people.
It can be real intimidating, Don.
You're staring at a screen that they have a person or an avatar ask you questions. You get zero feedback. You can't ask a question, and they're filming you. They're video recording you. My advice on these is prep for them the same way that you would interview, but don't freeze. What happens is people, because they're interacting with a camera, they think it's okay to not say something for a minute, and that's not okay. Every minute that you don't speak is also recorded, and nobody removes that. Don't go 10 seconds of silence while you think of how to answer. That will look terrible on the recording. You buy fractions of time by repeating questions to yourself or saying that's a good question and things like that. What about a panel interview? Make sure that you make eye contact with each person. If it's on Zoom, make sure that you address each person by name at some point in your answers. Tailor your answers to cover the interests of each person. HR is going to be interested in something different than a field manager. That's how you survive a panel interview. The main thing is everybody's there for a reason. So you make sure you address their concerns in some way, because they're there for a reason.
Hey, Don, is there a way to figure out who's going to be on the panel before you get in that situation?
Yeah, you can ask the person that sets it up, just say, who's going to be on the panel and can I know their titles? And it may change, but at least that you can get a head start on it. All right, there's two things you may need to prove to be hired today. One of them is that you can be productive remotely, and the other one is that you can do your own onboarding. We talked about onboarding last time. We talked about being productive remotely last time. I'm just going to kind of go flashing through there. You've been working remotely, all of us have, for the last year. And after every interview, everyone gets a thank you email. Robin, I don't love it that we've gone to email on these, but it is the business norm now, with some exceptions. If you're an officer level, you're still going to need to send a follow card in the mail. Also in higher ed, they're still pretty formal, and you would send a card in the mail.
You know, it can't hurt, Don, to
won't hurt.
Respond an email real quick, and then just drop a quick note of something that kind of stood out in the interview, a reminder, something that just says, hey, I was really paying attention, kind of a thing.
Yeah, and the other thing you can use, well, I agree with you. You can send an email and you can also send a card, even if a card has the same language as the interview, email. But you can also use that follow-up thank you letter to address a wrong or address a misconception. So maybe you're sitting there saying, and think about our meeting, I realized I said I didn't have any sales experience, but I now remember that I was the #1 Girl Scout sales cookie demon of Pulaski County some decades ago. I definitely have that skill set, even though I've not employed it at work lately. That gives you a chance to recover.
If you discover something in the interview that you didn't get that you didn't really know, or you thought, gosh, I completely forgot to bring that forward.
Yeah. So everyone gets a thank you letter. Okay. Now, section 4, salary negotiations. We have some sessions after this that are pretty important. I'm going to go kind of fast through these, if you don't mind, Robin. This is also on my website, and just going to go a little bit fast through these. When you're negotiating for salary, you want to always use win-win techniques. Zero-sum game techniques are okay if you're never going to see that person again, like if you're buying a car from a stranger. But if you're going to work with somebody, you cannot use scorched earth negotiating techniques. So be really careful about people teaching you how to negotiate for salary that are not trained in how to negotiate for salary. It's a different kind of negotiations. It's not the same. I'm going to strongly recommend that you be careful about your uncle who says he can teach you how to negotiate, who uses zero-sum game techniques. So at the end of this, everybody still has to be friendly if you're negotiating salary. I'm going to show all the slides, but I'm not necessarily going to talk about all of them, Robin, because we've got really important new information coming here in a minute. 3 principles of all negotiating. You never negotiate for salary until you have a job offer. And the other side will try to get you to prematurely negotiate. They'll bring it up, but don't fall for the bait. You wait until you have a job offer. And I'll come into why in just a moment. The first person to name an exact figure has lost strategic advantage, and that can be proved with game theory. And if you can't walk away from the deal, you're not negotiating, you're just begging. Those are 3 principles of all negotiating. You could take a negotiations course from a really expensive training company, and they will teach you these 3 same principles. So what about that first principle? You don't negotiate until you have a job offer. I'm just going to show you visually why. It's easy to understand. When you're a job candidate, you don't have any power. All the power belongs to the boss. All the power belongs to the hiring authority. They can decide not to return your call. They can decide not to call you. They've got the power. But watch this magical moment. Robin, we'd very much like to bring you into our company. We're offering you the position. If we let this red pen represent power, before I offer Robin the position, I've got the power. I'm the boss. But I just offered him the position. The power transfers over to him. Now, Robin, you've got all the power in the world because it belongs to you. That's when you negotiate, after an offer is made and before you say yes or no. Does that make sense?
It makes sense.
Okay. The second principle is super easy to show. This is from game theory. When one person makes a mark on a line, they allow the other person to decide what's the halfway mark between the first mark and the second mark. That's their first offer, and your target point is the one coming up from below. Okay, if they make a market there, you can make a mark there, and almost all negotiations march in equal increments toward the middle. That's where that comes from. If you can't walk away, you have no leverage. Remember, you can always decline to take this position and decide to go do something else. Reasons to negotiate. This is important. Hiring is, I call it a business ritual. It's like a ceremony. There's processes that each side does that are expected. And when you don't negotiate for salary, you're violating that ritual. You're upsetting the ceremony. Employers expect you to negotiate, and if you don't do it, you're actually disrupting a system that we've all agreed to abide by. Think about that for a minute. Let that sink in. They expect you to negotiate, and I have the data to prove this. Your future boss will lower their esteem of your skill set if you don't negotiate for salary. So even if they wouldn't have changed the number at all, if you don't even try, then they decide that they've overestimated your skill set, and they will literally reduce their esteem of your abilities because you didn't try to negotiate for salary. You're leaving money on the table for no good reason at all. So these are reasons to negotiate. I have a ton of analyses that show that it's somewhere between $700,000 to $2 or $3 million not to negotiate. Here's one. This is an undergrad example. Comes in at $1 million, but I've got tons of these, and they all show that it's a very, very, very expensive mistake to not negotiate for salary. So how do you be an effective negotiator? One way is to spend a bunch of time thinking about the motivations of the other side. The best negotiators don't negotiate from their point of view. They actually negotiate from the point of view of the person they're opposing, working against. Okay, they use we language. The classic we language in salary negotiations is, I was really hoping for more than this. What can we do? By using that sentence, what can we do? I've suddenly made that person not my opponent, but my colleague, my compatriot over here, helping me maximize the salary. And this may come as a shock, but many people don't care if you get the money. It's not their money. So they're perfectly happy to help you drive up the salary. I recently had a candidate that was interviewing for an executive position, and he said, well, what's the comp? And they said, and he didn't say anything. And so the hiring authority literally said, you need to ask for more money. My candidate said, I would like more money. He said, great, I can bump that too. And he named a figure that was like 15,000 more. And he just didn't want the guy to go through the process and not get that 15 grand. I think candidates often don't realize how much energy the other side puts into this. They've got an investment in closing the deal. They don't want to start over, and they don't want to miss. A hiring authority that doesn't recruit you, if the boss says, yeah, we want her, and they don't bring you in, then it looks bad for them. They're motivated to bring you on board, and it's a mistake if they don't. And they've invested a bunch of money in this. This is an analysis from Cheeky Scientists, which is a company that helps PhDs get jobs in the industry, and I'm a consultant to them. This is routine HR data. Creating a job position costs them $300. Reviewing resumes costs $1,250 in management time, even with applicant tracking systems. Phone screening costs about $2,250 in management time. Technical phone screens cost about $9,000 to pull engineers out and make them do this. On-site interviews cost around $11,000. Extending and negotiating an offer costs $900. I had a candidate once that was interviewing at Apple. He had 5 top executives at Apple in that room to negotiate, close the deal. I said, you have tremendous leverage. Do you know what it costs to take 5 executives at that level and stick them in the same room for the morning? You should really push for the max because they really want you. Win-win language. I was really hoping for more than that. What can we do? If you take nothing else out of this section, write down those 2 sentences. I was really hoping for more than that. What can we do? That's all you need to remember later on. I was really hoping for more than that. What can we do? How do you keep from doing this in advance? Here's some peculiarities of comp. If there's only one hire in the category, the range will be wide and soft. But if they're going to start 20 people on August the 5th, and you're just one of those 20, there's not going to be a lot of room in the negotiations for that position. Peculiarities of comp. Regional differences make two people earning nominally the same amount of money. They have very different purchasing power. I always use Chicago and Peoria, Illinois. One, you're going to have a lot of money. One, you're going to have not much money. Perks matter, in particular, a car. A car is worth about $1,000 a month. So if somebody gives you a car to drive, that's another $12,000 a year in income, for example. Here's salary sources. You can look for these later. Here's relocation sources right here. You can see what it costs to live in different places in the United States and compare two locations and compare how much money you'll have at the end of the month. Let's take a look at this right here, deflections. If they ask you what's it going to take to bring you on board early in interactions, your job as a job seeker is to try to deflect that. So you can say, salary's not my first concern. I'm really more interested in the people, the opportunity, and the job itself, the culture of the company. I'm sure this won't be a problem for us. Can we come back to this later? Or you can simply say, I would accept any reasonable offer. The problem with that second one is they almost always say, well, what do you consider reasonable? So it doesn't really work too well, but it's certainly something you can say. Here's another deflection. What range did you have in mind? Put it right back on them. Here's a third deflection. They say, hey, we've had several meetings. I need to know what it's going to take to bring you on board. You can say, Bob, you seem a little focused on the salary. Is there any reason you won't be able to make a competitive offer? To which Bob will 100% of the time say, no, of course we pay competitively. In which case you will say, great, this won't be a problem for us. I could do these deflections kind of all day long. Learn these scripts, but don't necessarily memorize them. They may paint you in a corner and make you say a number, but don't feel held by that number. You can always say later that you've done some more research, you talked to some more people, and you now realize that that number is not accurate after all. Don't feel bound by a number, especially if they bully you to get it, okay? Sooner or later, you're going to actually get a job offer. And when you do, then you simply say, okay, well, that's good. I really like the company, but what about that salary? Is there some room there? What can we do? And that'll help you get a higher rate. There's some slides in here for you to look at later. I'm going to just move on through these because I think the gist of it you've gotten. And this is the order in which you negotiate terms. You always finish the negotiations for your base salary before saying, and what will my signing bonus be? You finish that before you go on to 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. I'll let you look at these later. This is on my website, okay? I hate to run through these, Robin, but I got some interesting stuff I want to get to. What do you do if they get visibly upset with you for trying to negotiate salary? And it does sometimes happen, especially if you're not smooth. You just say, hey, Julie, I'm not trying to throw ultimatums on the table here. I'm just trying to discover what's possible.
What if the job application asks for your salary requirements?
Yeah, I know many of them do. The first thing you want to do is try to use words such as discuss at interview or negotiable or depends. That usually fails. The next thing you want to do is put 0 and see if you can advance to the next screen. Sometimes that will work. If they give you a table that starts like 30 to 40, 40 to 50, 50 to 60, just pick the lowest item on that table that you can possibly pick, even if it's 0. You don't really give them any information there. If you use hidden job market techniques, you often will only run into that after they're pretty interested in you, but you still just give them the smallest possible number that will allow you to advance to the next screen. That's how you deal with those. It's a battle of wits, really. They're trying to get you to give up information and you're trying to not. So it's ongoing. I'm trying to get to a point where we have some question time at the end. If there's further questions about salary negotiations, I'd be happy to address them or possibly go back and go through that, the 10 different things that you negotiate in order. But let's talk about the future. So this section here is back to the office. This is for everybody, including people that are currently working remotely. But what's going on? This is in the news every single day. Every day I clip an article from the business press about this. And here's the deal. Employers want you back. Bosses want you back. So these CEOs got in trouble for saying this. They said this at a CEO forum by the Wall Street Journal, and they all got in trouble for it. Bosses question eagerness of remote employees. Remote work doesn't work well for those who want to hustle. I guess that means it works fine for people that are kind of slackers. That's the CEO of JP Morgan, James Dimon. Remote work is an aberration that we're going to correct as soon as possible. That's the CEO of Goldman Sachs, David Solomon. We should change the status of staffers who are rarely in the office to contractors rather than full-time employees. That's Kathy Merrill, CEO of Washington Media. This is what they say when the microphone is on and they forgot where they are. All of these CEOs walked this back and said, oops, I apologize. I didn't mean to malign remote workers. Remote workers are just fine. But that's not what they think. What they think is what they said. And so that's why I have these quotes in here so you can see what they're saying. When are we going inside? We're all going to go inside in the fall for regular businesses. This summer, there's going to be a little bit of everything. It's going to be hybrid. It's going to be Wild West. It'll change from week to week.
We don't have any clue here when we're actually going to be able to return to work.
No, the summer is going to be up for, the thing about the summer is it's going to change from week to week. So, and from the university's side, universities are not going to go totally face-to-face until next. And I can tell this by the way they're booking their conferences.
Right.
So next spring, conferences will be in person, but this fall, they're going to be both. Is remote virtual work here to stay or not? Well, yes and no. There's no question it's going to stick around, but there's pros and cons. And that's what I really want to bring to the forefront today. There's reasons to embrace it and reasons not to. First of all, let's look at the data. This experiment was not a failure. Many people, not all, but many people are more productive. And this has been proved. These CEOs' comments that only slackers want to work from home, they're naive. It's not based on data. It's based upon their biases. It's cheaper. There's no question it's cheaper. If you don't have to commute, that's cheaper. If I don't have to provide you with 300 square feet of an office, that's cheaper for me on the other side. Many are more productive. And there's no question that virtual work and remote management are not going to go away.
Don't you think people should try to keep on top of things and trying to really plan for if you get that opportunity to stay home and you want to stay home, that you really show well as it relates to when someone's looking and evaluating, should we keep them in the office or should they be allowed to stay home?
A buddy of mine did this for years at the University of California at Berkeley. And the way he did it was if you pinged him, he pinged you back within 5 seconds. He appeared to be working 24 hours a day. I mean, that was how he proved that he was on the ball. But that's a lot of work. And also, this is not for everybody. This is not right for young people, which is what I'm about to argue. Young people love this. They love it, but it hurts them. Let's talk about that. Here's the number of days that people want to work from home. During the pandemic, it went above 60% in the whole economy. By a couple of months ago, it was down to around 45%. And it looks, according to these projections, it will never go below 20% again. It's definitely going to stick around, but this is not right for many young people. Being productive remotely. There's a solid body of literature on this. The science has stepped in, the management science has stepped in and passed judgment. Who wins? People who know their jobs already. That works for them. And they don't need guidance or supervision. That works for them. Older people on a career plateau, and by older, I mean older compared to college graduates. So that's late 30s to mid 40s and up. They're on a career plateau. They're not trying to get promoted. They just want to do their job and be effective and reduce the harassment factor. They love telecommuting. Who does not thrive is newbies. Newbies also doesn't mean just college graduates. It also means people that are hired into a new company. You're a newbie when you're hired into a new company. You may not thrive remotely. You may not pick up the culture. You may not become known. You may not build the networks that allows you to solve problems. ADD types, that's adult attention deficit disorder. So they do not thrive at home. They're too easily distracted. If you think you're someone who's too easily distracted, this could be a poor idea for you. You must create a quiet, calm space at home, and you may need to create your own office at home at your own expense. And who else doesn't thrive is people with chaos at home. They fight with their spouse. Their kids are loud. Dogs run through their office. There's always some plumbing emergency. Anyone with chaos at home is not going to thrive. Now, this is a pretty interesting slide. What it takes to be a good manager in person is different from what it takes to be a good manager remotely. And if you're going to be somebody with a career today, you need to be able to deliver on both sides of this slide. Here's what is known to be associated with high ratings for an in-person manager: confidence, charisma, and a physical presence. They command a room. Here's what's newly discovered to be effective for remote managers: empathy. You don't see any empathy on the left side, but you need empathy on the right. Empathetic, organized. Hey, if the meeting on Zoom starts at 9 o'clock and you come sauntering in at 9:13, everybody hates you. Empathetic, organized, able to create connections between separated team members. That's a very different skill than the stuff on the left. Enunciates and projects voice. Those are things that are required for success as a remote manager. There's starting to be a good body of literature on the remote side. Here's my warning to young people. Working remotely can just kill you, okay? Maybe that's overly dramatic, but if you're working remotely, are you going to get access to skills development? Are you going to be able to ask somebody in the next office to show you how to do something? Are you going to build the kind of network in a company that allows you to figure out, well, what do you do if you need a new phone and you need it for a meeting tomorrow, and the person who's supposedly in charge of IT won't return your call? If you're at an organization, you can solve every one of those problems quickly and easily. But if you're at home, you may not succeed at solving those problems. My advice for young people to build networks, to build skills, is to put on that suit, get on the train, and show up at the office. Show up early, stay late, and ask lots of questions. My strong advice is to show up early. This is in my book, Who Gets Promoted, Who Doesn't, and Why, which was named Career Management Book of the Year. There's reasons that this advice is on this slide. Never eat lunch alone, okay? That's my advice. There, she's going to the office. She's going to succeed.
I think that the whole idea of eating lunch with someone new and making it planned, seek out some of those people that you don't know, that you'd like to know. And even if it's the advice interview that you talked about, or an informational interview where you've got some structure to it, boy, is that beneficial for your building your own network and meeting new people and talking about learning things about the company that you may not know.
You build these networks not just to save your job, also to make you more effective.
Yeah.
If you know how to solve problems in a company by picking up the phone and calling somebody that you've met and had lunch with, that makes you more valuable than somebody at home that may be really good at some task, but can't solve the random problems that come up all the time at work.
That person on the other end of the phone is going to be a lot more willing to take your call if you've actually got a relationship with them.
Going to a meeting as a new hire, learn to listen more than you speak, but watch for your opportunity to show that you have brought ideas to the table. Bring some ideas. Don't just ask for help, but offer up a menu of possible solutions. If you bring a problem, bring at least some solutions that you think might work. That will be an entirely different human being than somebody that goes into a meeting and says, I have a problem, who can help me solve it? And don't love your own ideas more than you love solving the problem. People quickly recognize if you're not willing to be collaborative or a team player or take one for the team, they quickly figure that out. Now, this is about you and your boss. Okay, we're working over this idea. You went back to work in an office. How do you sit down and get started with your boss? This is super important. Ask your boss these questions. How much communication do you want from me, and what do you want it to look like? Okay. When can I ask questions to you about how to do my work? Who else can I ask questions about this? Do you like to see drafts, or do you prefer for me to take it to a final form before showing it to you? And does the company have quiet hours at night, or what's too early or too late to email or bother you? Companies are starting to have quiet hours. It's against the rules to email somebody after 8 p.m. or before 7 a.m. Make sure you find out those rules. This is super important. Young people want to onboard with their peers. They want to become a member of a team. And that's not what you do. When you join a new organization, you figure out how to be successful with your boss. Your boss is the one that matters. You don't want to be miserable with your team, but your team's not going to keep you. Your boss is going to keep you. Spend energy and time figuring out what your boss wants. Here's how I like to think about it. When you join a new organization, be a little bit cautious of somebody that wants to be your best friend because they don't have any other best friends. Be a little bit cautious of somebody that's overly friendly before you get the lay of the land in the office. I'll leave that at that. This is a message for everybody. Do not fall for the story that the company has an open door policy. Open door policies are a myth. Information flows are controlled for a reason. Senior executives do not have time to listen to minor petty squabbles from lower level people. So don't fall for that. Never go over your boss's head without their permission. And don't go walking in a CEO's office and lay out a few complaints. That's just crazy. I see people fall for this. They usually get fired because at orientation, they heard this story that you can take any beef to this person or any beef to that person. Please don't. Find out what your boss cares about, and then be sure that you care about that too. Nothing could be more simple than that. And here's the way I like to think about bosses and the relationship to people under them. People under them provide information to the boss as if she were an airline pilot. That information needs to be timely and accurate. When it's timely and accurate, she can fly the plane well, efficiently. And when it's not timely and not accurate, she can't do her job. Your job as an underling is to provide the information that your boss wants in a timely and accurate manner. You're trying to make a judgment about what to do with yourself in a new organization. If you're ambitious, it's not enough to just do good work. You also have to have a communications plan that others know you are doing good work. Again, this is covered in my book, Who Gets Promoted, Who Doesn't, and Why. After you've been on the job it depends on the environment, but somewhere between a few weeks and 6 months, somewhere in there. If you're ambitious, your boss needs to know that. After you get figured out how to do your job, you got to get your job figured out, okay? Maybe you figure it out in a month, okay? Sometime between 6 months and 6 weeks, you go up to the boss and you say, boss, I think I'm doing pretty well. If I'm not, you tell me, make some adjustments. Let me ask you this. What would I need to do, accomplish, or learn that when there are opportunities for advancement, you will think of me right away? Okay, that's called the conversation. And if you go to an MBA program, they'll actually teach you this. You sit down with your boss and you say, what do I need to prove that I'm the first person you look at when you need someone to go up the ladder? Your boss cannot read your mind. Don't assume that they see your ambition. You must tell them verbally, I want to advance. What do I need to do? And this is really something you need to grasp. The boss doesn't always promote the person that's doing the greatest job. They may want to keep that person there. That person may not want promoted, but they definitely will consider the people that want to move, because when they ask you to move, they need you to do it. I have a few things about Zoom. I'm going to kind of zoom through them. Stop complaining about Zoom. It's not professional. Figure out how Zoom works and all those bells and features that you can be effective. Look directly at the camera. Don't look at yourself. Turn off your own views. You don't even see yourself. Here's how to prepare for a Zoom meeting. Be very careful with humor. Humor doesn't work over Zoom. Comedians really cried about trying to be funny over Zoom. Don't be funny. Just give that up for a while. Here's how you deal with Zoom fatigue. The main thing that you do is once you're off your screen with Zoom, even for a moment, look at something 2 miles away, look at something out the window across the street, and don't switch from your computer laptop to your cell phone and check your email and messages, because what you need to do is get off of a screen for a moment. So those are some ways of dealing with Zoom. Here's a Dilbert cartoon about it. Dilbert actually has good management science in it. If you read Dilbert all the time, you'll see it. Now, what about going back into the office? So there's a lot of anxiety about going back. People are not used to being in an office. They're not used to being in buildings. Do I wear a mask? How many people fit in an elevator? How close do I stand to people? What do you say to people in the mirror in the bathroom? This is stuff that was never in question 2 years ago, and now we all have to think about it. Are people bringing dogs to work? Some people don't like dogs. Are people bringing their kids to work? This is actually happening. People are bringing their kids to work. We'll see how long that lasts. Is it okay to ask? And when people wear a mask, what does that mean? Are they signaling their politics, their vaccination status? They have health fragility? Well, what does it mean? And we don't know. If you do go back to the office, and almost all of us are going to, embrace the lifestyle, go out for coffee, never lunch alone, organize a walk around the block at lunchtime club, restart the fantasy sports leagues, learn personal details about your colleagues that you probably wouldn't get around to on Zoom. What are their kids? Do they have hobbies? Do they have passions? Do they like the color purple? Invite people to socialize again. Theater, pro sports, poker night, whatever it is, cup of coffee, coffee break, doesn't matter. We're all a little rusty, and my advice to you would be to dust off your skill set. Go back and retrain yourself how to look someone in the eye, explain why you're making a presentation to them, learn how to deliver PowerPoint in a group setting face-to-face. If you're dusty, here's some things at the bottom that will allow you to address this. Toastmasters International, improv theater, open mic night, and sales and presentation and media training, which is available at any company. Ask for this training. This is really important. Learn to tell a story. People like people who can tell stories. They remember stories. The human brain is hardwired to remember stories. And here's some advice. Keep all your stories G-rated. If someone else is cursing, ignore them. You don't do it too. Stories have a structure. They have a setup, they have action, and they have a satisfying conclusion. Learn how to do that. Don't dominate a space. Don't become somebody that's busy telling stories instead of getting work done. Finally, don't upstage your boss ever. Don't become what they call a topper. Boss tells a story about riding a motorcycle, and you tell a story about riding a motorcycle further. Boss tells a story about, playing baseball, and you tell about the time you tried out for the Yankees. Don't do those things, but learn to tell a story. That's an important thing if you can learn to do it. Let's take a look at some career problems. Here's very standard career problems and some quick answers to them because of my long-standing relationship with Albert Baker Fund. If one of these problems is vexing you, please reach out to Robin or me to get some counsel on it because these problems could be very difficult for people. Here we go. Career problems. Too old. There's techniques to make it disappear on your resume. Then you have to look at your appearance, talk fast, walk fast. And you can make too old go away as a problem. Tell people you would be happy working for the job that's in question at the salary that's in question. Because part of the time when they say too old, they really mean too expensive. If you can convince them that you're not going to be too expensive and you'd be enthusiastic about that role, then they can overlook that. No experience, use activities to create experience, use volunteer work to create experience. There's solutions to that. Job hopper, you do not have to put all your jobs on your resume. Take out some of them and see if job hopper goes away. List your jobs year to year. Don't put January to February, just put 2019. Switching industries, you have to use the hidden job market to switch industries. It's harder to switch industries than it is to switch functions. If you're switching industries, you'll have to use the hidden job market to do it. A bunch more material about that is in the prior presentation. Returning to the workplace after a break. You've been a stay-at-home parent or you've been in prison for 5 years. So there's a technique called career repair that will allow you to do that. That's explained on my website. There's a button that literally says career repair. What you do is you compress career progression into the shortest amount of time. You get any job to get started, and instead of spending 2 years at each appointment, you try to spend a few months at each appointment, and you can quickly repair yourself back up to where you belong, even after a break. But you do have to start somewhere, and so that's important. Gaps, people don't care about gaps right now, to be honest with you. Employers don't care. There's just too many people with too many reasons for gaps. The pandemic, you don't even have to explain it. If you last worked 18 months ago, you don't have to explain that. Employers don't care. They're saying that they have a recruiting shortage of talent. So get out there, don't tell a lie, and go for it. Glamour industries. Glamour industries receive about 1,000 applications per opening. And glamour industries are fashion, politics, advertising, media, movies. Those are glamour industries, politics, believe it or not. The only way to get into glamour industries is with an invitation or hidden job market techniques. Family businesses and small to medium-sized enterprises create a unique career pathing problem. In order to advance, if you're working for a family or a small business, you may need to switch employers regularly because that employer may not have a place to move you up. And so instead of getting stuck there, you switch employers and you can achieve the same career pathing that someone can achieve in a larger organization, but you will be switching back and forth between different employers. Okay, nothing succeeds like excess. I love this, Robin. It wakes people up near the end of a conversation. Here's a couple of my books, and we'll see what people have on their minds. That's it.
Terrific, unbelievable, great, Don. One of the things I wanted to circle back to in the chat was Mindy said she worked for Edward Jones in the financial advisor hiring department and had a couple of tips, especially for college-age students. Mindy, if you could unmute yourself. Yeah, let's hear about it.
I worked there for 6 years. I left in 2013. My information's from back then, which it could be totally different now because about every year they made some kind of major adjustment to the process. I can tell you what I know from back then. Towards the end, they shifted it from hiring volumes of people, because when I was there my first year, I personally processed 12,000 applications. They found out the attrition rate was like 50% or 60%. It was very expensive. They shifted to hiring quality candidates instead of volume, which worked out much better for everybody. The application was online. You had to do an online application. Even if your father was a financial advisor, you still had to do that. And that was a screening process. If you got a referral from a current Edward Jones financial advisor, that was golden, because I think you got an automatic pass through the screening. One of the requirements to get through the screening was that you had to have a job working while you were in college. And also you had to have a college degree first. While you're in college, you had to have a job showing that you contributed to your college paying for college. They didn't want any freeloaders because the job nature was managing people's money. They wanted people to have a value, of how much you have to earn to get things. I thought that was interesting. If there's any college people, do try and have a job in college. I don't know how other corporations work, but Edward Jones places a high value on that. It did work. The attrition rate went down to like 20%, getting through the hiring, the training, and the passing the Series 7 exam, which that knocks out a lot of people because it's kind of challenging. But anyways, I just thought I'd share that the application, you couldn't get around doing an online application. I know that's a process. And you also had to have your whole 10-year work history, even gaps. You had to put in, if you had a gap, like 6 months between jobs, whatever it was, you just had to add all that in. They wanted a full, complete history. They did a background check on you, and they verified your employment. Don't lie. It was a process getting just through the application and getting interviews. I used to sit next to the hiring specialist and got to hear them all day. They did do a short screening interview, and then they did a longer, like an hour and a half behavioral based interview. It was pretty much all behavioral based. And then if you got past that, you had to go in, and they had like a simulator program where you took phone calls, you had people come in, they had a live person doing all this, and they evaluated your work. Like if you had two things happening at once, you had a customer in your office and then the phone rang, what do you do? It was very hands-on. And then also because Edward Jones does door knocking as their business model for new financial advisors, usually in the first, till you get your customer base up, first 3 or 4 years, you literally go out and knock on doors in your neighborhood. They have you do a door knocking exercise where you go out and do some door knocking just to make sure your people are comfortable with it. So
that's great. Mindy, thanks so much. Did you find today's session really helpful, particularly with all your background and experience? Did you learn some things today that you think would be really helpful?
I did. Yeah. Because I'm a terrible interviewer myself. It's like terrifying for me. And I've gotten a little bit better at it, but it's still is challenging for me because I like varieties. My background is all over the place. I don't have like one, not like a CPA where I worked in that industry all my life. I've jumped around a lot, but I love the variety. Every chance I get about learning about to interview or anything career related, I try and learn more about it. So yeah, it was very helpful.
That's great. Thanks so much for your input. Pretty fun to hear from someone, huh, Don, that gives some of that specific advice.
Thanks, Mindy. I love those assessment center things. They're really, really expensive. Not many employers use them, but they're very effective at sorting out people that appear to be able to do a job, but that cannot. They're really effective that way. I want to kind of make a comment for everybody. We're entering a renaissance moment for employees. And the reason it has partially to do with the pandemic, but also has to do with some longer term demographic trends. And there is simply a shortage of human beings in the middle of the market. If you have not hit the goals for your career development, retry, because employers are about to have to make a lot of compromises to keep themselves fully staffed. It's a beautiful time to go for a promotion, to try to make a leap, to try to break out. You may have to move. You may have to take an assignment that's less than desirable to make a step that allows you to make the next step. But if you want to play, the career marketplace is entering a moment when the power is going to shift to the employee. Something like 2/3 of people want to make a change right now. And when the employers call them back, they're going to quit in droves, massive droves. It's a fantastic time to be on the market. And even if you have a job, be on the market.
Don, one of the things I wanted to show people real quick, you talked extensively about when you were talking about your jobs, those job salaries and being able to be a little bit knowledgeable about that. We have some incredible resources on the ABF Career Alliance website. This is in the College to Career Roadmap under the student section. But you can see here, we've got some tabs and there's lots of things in here. And I wanted to call out this particular link, the 50 Best Jobs in America link. And you can do a search. You can do a lot of really good investigatory work on your own to figure out what some of the median base salary is, how many job openings there are, job satisfaction. You can learn an awful lot from this particular website. And there's lots of resources out there. And we have incredible resources within the Career Alliance itself in lots of different places. So take some time and look at our tools and tips section. Don mentioned informational interviews earlier. We have a couple of articles on here, and there's also a PDF of informational interview questions that you can download. And then when you do that, you've got something to work from and craft your own questions in addition to that. But some really great information. We also have Life Launch. You guys recognize this guy right here. We asked Don a few years ago if he would create an online career course for us. Although this is geared and oriented towards students, the information that's in here is really timeless and really, really good information. Take advantage of this free online career course by our career guru, Dr. Don Asher. Remember that the Albert Baker Fund is an incredible resource for the Christian Science movement. We have wonderful people, volunteers that help, assist, provide lots of different opportunities for folks out there in our community. So be sure and check out the albertbakerfund.org for any questions that you might have. And I strongly recommend, if you're not registered with the Career Alliance, you should be, as a job seeker or a career ally and mentor. This is an incredible platform for people in our community to connect with one another on a professional basis. So please be sure and visit the Career Alliance, utilize the resources that the Albert Baker Fund is providing for you. All of these are free, and be sure that you log in, register, create a profile that you can connect. I just had someone, while we were on, submit 6 requests for connections. We facilitate that. I was talking to a student yesterday who had no idea of the incredible volunteers that we have that are career allies who are willing to help, that are willing to do informational interviews. Some of them have job opportunities and internship opportunities. Wow, Don, this was an incredible 2-part series that we are so thankful and grateful for you. And we're grateful to our sponsor, the Isabel Foundation, for supporting this and making this whole career workshop series possible. You are fabulous, and what a great resource and an awesome friend you are to the Albert Baker Fund.
Thank you much, Rob. And I just want to encourage people to either watch the videos or watch for those slides, because there's a lot of content. In addition to listening to the approaches and the tips, there's a lot of solid referenced content that you can follow up with.
I certainly concur with that. And in any of those things, you please reach out to me. You can reach out to me via email, robin@albertbakerfund.org. My phone number, you text me, call me. Don't be sure and take advantage of this incredible resources. And if we need to get Don on the phone, we'll get him on the phone and figure out, if I can't answer it, we'll figure out how to get it done one way or the other. Again, thank you all. It's been an incredible few hours. It went by really fast, and look forward to seeing you all and hearing from you all. Don, love you, my friend. Appreciate you very much.
Thanks, everybody. See you next time.